Hey guys, welcome back. It is your favorite Gimp with a Limp, and I'm here with another quick treat for you. This one is a game that was sent to me by Lock and Load Publishing. This is The Day Is Ours, The Battle of Princeton 1777. Obviously, this is one of the War Diary type folio type games. There is a War Diary magazine, has the same looking cover on it, and they have some articles talking about the battle and the game and all that good stuff. So this is one of those types of games that you can get from War Diary if you get the subscription to the magazine. Remember, theirs is a little different than some of the other war game magazines do. They don't include the game in with the magazine. With your subscription, you're able to pick from a selection of games. So it's got its bonuses and its drawbacks. Yes, it's always cool to pick up the magazine and have a game right there in your hand because you love having it in your hands. But you do get that choice, right? So if you want to be able to pick what you want, War Diary is one worth checking out. And I gotta say, I like their articles. They cover a wide variety of things, historical stuff, gaming stuff, all the stuff war gamers are going to be into. So this one, like I said, obviously by Lock and Load Publishing, I got just part of the map set out in front of us here, and that's because it's actually a fair bit bigger than I was anticipating. So let me take and show you the rest of the components real quick, and then we'll get into the basics of gameplay, and I'll touch a little more on this map here. Rulebook's easy to understand. You can read through it in just a few minutes. There's only like 13 pages of rules. Yep, here we go. That's the end of the rules there, and the latter half of the rule book is the scenarios, which are actually, I gotta say, laid out rather nicely for the game. It tells you any of the specifics of the scenario. Off to the right, once you've read the specifics, it gets into the units that are involved, the commanders, because there are commanders in this game. We'll show you the counters here in a sec. What units they had underneath them, and then all the good stuff if they're deployed into certain areas, if they have filled fortifications, that type stuff. Any of that is listed down here, nice and neat in your order of battle. I always got to say that Lock and Load does a fairly good job when it comes to their orders of battle, laying it out nice and clear, easy to see. Some of the ones that have driven me crazy, I know you guys have dealt with that before, where you open it up and it looks like like an accountant's spreadsheet. And it's tiny little lettering, long list, multiple columns, and all it says is like some little obscure number referencing a unit counter, and then some other little obscure number referencing a hex that you got to put it on, and then there's like 1,000 of them, and you're looking at it like, oh my god, I hate my life. This is nowhere near any of that. So nice and easy to get deployed and set up. Shouldn't take too long. So that is a bonus. It does have a few player aids. If you played any Lock and Load games before, you are going to be very familiar when it comes to all the components. They're all the same type of quality you get in any of their games. The cardstock material that the player aids are made out of, the maps, same type stuff. The counters pre-rounded, we'll show you those here in just a sec. So if you played a Lock and Load game, you know what this material is. You know already whether or not you like it. I like it. I think it's good quality stuff for wargaming. We do have our 4 player aids here. We have our double-sided combat results table, so fire and melee combat and modifiers for those. A little single-sided terrain effects chart that we have here. You see nothing on the back, but tells you what you need to know for movement. We have our turn record tracks here, and then just a little counter breakdown and your morale tracks here at the bottom to see if your army breaks during combat. But I do like that they include this, especially this little stuff right here at the top, because especially when you're first learning a game, after you've played it a little while, of course you know what all these numbers are, but it's easy to forget, exactly what number is referencing what. So I always like that Lock and Load includes this stuff so you can easily see, hey, this is range, open order, movement, whatever. And while we are looking at this, go ahead and to show you for the counter, since this is a little bit bigger, it does have a selection of numbers on it. But again, if you play one of their games, they kind of stick in the same order. Combat factor first, we've got morale here in the middle, which is a little different because it's usually range there for their games. but it is color different to kind of remind you that that is morale. Off to the right is movement factor. That's how many hexes, like clear hexes, they can go in, and then you lose points if you're going across rivers, hills, trees, all that good stuff. If it has a white border square on it, that's what the open order unit is referencing. And then if a unit has a range, so that means it can hit something besides the enemy units directly next to it, because this game is based on the Revolutionary War. So obviously they only had things like muskets, weren't very accurate out to a far distance, but some units did have rifles that they were using, which gave these guys a farther range. And then there are artillery units as well that have a range even farther, up to like 4 or 6 hexes that they can shoot out, reach out and touch someone. And then it actually comes with 2 counter sheets. Most of these usually come with 1, so you are actually getting a fair amount of counters with this. Again, standard lock and load tactical, not tactical, lock and load publishing type stuff. I keep always wanting to say tactical when I say that. It's kind of bad when you name your game after your company. The nice, thick, pre-rounded counters that pop out nice and easy, which I just popped them out. You always have to be careful with these, but thankfully they do pop back in nice and easy as so. So you can keep them stored in the counter sheet if you want. I would use baggies. But we have the U.S. forces, the American forces on one of these counters or one of these sheets, and then some of the admin type counters like fortifications, readouts, stuff like that. And I keep knocking them out. And then the back side is obviously the reduced side for the units. Any of the ones that are blanks are units that are like leaders and or only have 1 step instead of 2 steps. So you can see that just in a little peek, and then you see some of the commanding officers up here at the top. And again, if you've played one of their types of games before, a lot of this will seem familiar in the fact that your leaders don't have like combat values, but they do have the ability to grant some combat modifiers to you, or rallying bonuses if your units become disrupted, that type of stuff. And just so you guys can see it, here are the British counters, those dirty limeys, the evil redcoats. They've got a few more cannons than the Americans have, but a bunch of their units, same type stuff. They have some open order units as well. People who have rifles can reach out and touch a little bit farther. And again, they're commanders. And I think their cannons are a little bit better than the U.S. cannons. They have some farther range ones. The neat thing about this game, though, is you actually can capture enemy cannons in the game. So if you get a chance to move your combat units into it, you can take control of the cannons and use them against the enemy, and then they can actually recapture them. There are rules in the game for spiking the guns to eliminate them, to destroy them, to keep that from happening. But I do like the fact that you can capture enemy weapons and use them against your opponent. I think that's a neat inclusion in the game. So those are our counters for it. Now, the maps, again, if you've played a lock and load game, you're going to recognize it. And you're going to have 6 maps this size. They're fairly big, but when I was first looking at it, for most of these folio type games, you get 1 or 2 maps. It's usually not that much. There's actually 6 maps. Now, they are single-sided maps, but it is a large setup for this game. And something I've mentioned before that I like about how they do their setups is when you first lay it down, yeah, look at that. It's kind of sitting up like that and not really conducive to putting counters on. But they do have a crease that you guys can see right here in the center that's put into the cardstock of the map. So when you set it down, you can just hit it with a little crease and it lays down nice and flat. I like that they've got those included. It's the same type of maps that they do have. Lock and Load Tactical, World at War 85, all those types, the paper maps that you've used before. But I love that crease there in the center because it makes it so much easier to lay these flat. Of course, you can include or put it under plexiglass, do whatever crap that you want. It is your game, have fun with it. But you don't need it with these, and it doesn't have that glossy film that makes them shine when they're under camera lights, which is always a bonus for someone like myself. All right, so I zoomed in the map just a little bit just to give you guys a basic taste. We're not going to play through a long session of the game or anything like that. It's a folio type game, 13 pages of rules, so it's not incredibly in depth. The big thing about this game is it's going to be more of a positional type combat. And what I mean by that is that the units have facings when it comes to combat. So if we're looking at our units here, the 4 that I've got stacked out, a couple of red, a couple of blue, the units all have to face a hex side, okay? So directly in front, if we're looking at this counter right here, directly in front of him, both of these red guys are actually in his front arc. So when you are just in normal position, there is column formation. We'll touch on that in a second. The front 3 hexes are considered to be your front. So you can fire or do melee combat into those hexes. The 2 adjacent to you, back like here and here, these are considered your flank, and then you're directly behind your unit, so the bottom of your unit counter is your rear. So you can't just throw the counters down willy-nilly on the board. It reminds me a little bit of the Great Battles campaign, like Alexander, stuff like that. Obviously, unit facing very much matters in this game, and that's going to be the key. You get bonuses if you can get around behind your unit. You get bonuses, or enemy units. You get bonuses if you can flank them. You can have situations where you kind of tag team them with a couple of guys in melee combat. So the thing that I found interesting about this one is your units can conduct fire combat and melee combat, and they can do it in the same turn. So this one is a I go, you go system. So you're going to move all of your units, and then you're going to fire with all your units, and then the enemy gets to do defensive firing. So you'll fire, they defensive fire. That goes back and forth, and then surviving units after that can do melee combat. After that, you'll get into your rally phase, where any units that are disrupted, they do morale checks, they get bonuses if they've got leaders stacked with them, all that good stuff. So it's really easy to see when you're going through with your units. You'll take and do your checks, look at whatever their firepower is. Like this one is a 4. So when we look at our little fire combat results table here, we would be under the 1 to 4 combat factors firing, and then 5 to 6 is going to use this. You can never have more than 6, even if you combine units into a stack, or only 2 units can be stacked. Or if they do a combined fire, you can never have more than 6. And the results are nice and easy. No effect, defender step loss, defender morale check, as far as the results that you can get. And of course, the big thing on this one is the modifiers for position. So like here, if the unit is attacked through its flank or rear hex side, add +2 to the die roll. So attacking here, we just boom, fire, and that's it. But attacking here makes a huge world of difference in getting that +2 to the combat. Now, another key thing that you have to keep in mind, because I could see people making this mistake, I know I would probably make this mistake, is your fire combat is a 2d6 roll, okay? While your melee combat is a 1d6 roll. Not exactly sure why they chose to do it that way, but it's what they decided to go with. So the game itself, like I said, relatively simple to keep track of what's going on. You got your movement, then you do your fire, any defensive fire, then the declaration of melee combat, resolving your melee combat, and you're going to do that on down the line. One of the drawbacks that I have noticed with this game is the fact that there's not a significant way to mark the units that have already conducted your fire attacks or melee attacks. That's relatively easily rectified, though. You guys have seen me plenty of times in the past use my little yellow beads. You can use whatever you want, whatever little type of marker you have, but I would definitely suggest doing that because the game is relatively large. So as you conduct your attacks, go on down the line, doing your fire attacks, boom, 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 mark them with the yellow beads, and then you could even come back and remove the yellow beads from the ones that you've already done melee combat with. Simple system just off the top of my head that I think would help kind of rectify that. I do keep in mind, though, that this is a folio type game, so the components are small. It's meant to fit in a Ziploc type bag, so they can't have markers and multitudes of counters. It's got to be within a certain cost limit. It's got to be able to fit in there. So I'm not going to fault them too much for not having, markers built in the game for something like that. Overall, I'm relatively impressed with the amount of game I think that you could get out of a game this size. Because when I first look at the folio package, right, you pick up something like a little baggie like this, and you're not expecting that much getting out of it. And I'm not saying that the game's deep or anything like this. This goes more towards beer and pretzels than it does, complex, deep, chromy type game, by any means. But it is a fun game for its size. That's what I think is one of the defining factors on this one, is the fact that it does have 6 maps, so it gives you plenty of space, which I think is a key factor in this one, since you are going to try to focus on maneuver combat, right? You want to try to get your guys into advantageous positions to where you can advance after combat, where you can get around on the flank of your enemy, where you can hit them with hammer and anvil type stuff. All of that type of combat that you've done before in any of your war games, you're going to have available here. You can do it with your cavalry. There's cavalry, cannons. Try to create little choke points to take the enemy out. I got to say that I think it's definitely going to appeal to a fair amount of people. It's probably going to appeal more to those who are into Revolutionary War, Civil War type era games. Like I said, it's not my particular favorite. I do lean more towards either Ancients or World War II, or even modern, so like fictional World War III type stuff. But I do like this one, and I want to get it to the table. I would keep it on the table if I didn't have a prototype that I have to get done that is in the wings. You guys actually stay tuned for that. It is from my favorite designer, Mr. David Thompson. Is coming up here very soon, so you guys be looking for that in the next couple of days. But yeah, this one is good enough that it has me going, yeah, I'd actually like to get this to the table, which I'm not usually that keen on with revolutionary style games. But I think this one's got enough going for it while being simple to learn and understand. Just make sure you keep track of the modifiers, because there are a fair amount of modifiers depending on the terrain, positioning, stuff like that. And the fact that the defensive player does get his defensive fire, it's only mentioned really one time in the rulebook, unless I missed it somewhere where, and that's possible because I've only read this thing a couple of times, but we got here set up is as specified by scenario. Phasing player conducts movement. Phasing player conducts fire combat. Non-phasing player conducts defensive fire. That's really the only place I see that mentioned. I think that could have been fleshed out just a little bit more, exactly when or how that goes. Not a huge deal, because fire combat is described relatively in depth in the game, and if there's nothing else changing it, then it should be done exactly as it's written here. And just to show you guys, there are a few other things that really do make this stand out, again, for the positional combat. Like I showed you here with the regular units, the front, flanks, rear, but that changes again with column formation, where you only have a single hex as the front, single hex as the rear, and now 4 flanks as the hex. And there are some extra negative modifiers, things that can cause you to get disrupted easier, stuff like that, depending on your location on the map, because obviously you do not want to get attacked while you are in column formation. Things like the readout here, which I don't know if I'm saying that right, but I hope I am, because I've never been 100% certain about that word. But the round fortification, right? This is front all the way around. So if you got a couple of units in there, every hex is their front. They're firing at every direction. They're kind of like the Marines at the Frozen Chosen. Field works, front and flanks and rear, just like normal units. And then the fleche, however you want to say that, is front everywhere besides the very rear. I do like that they got this included as well to make it easy to understand. Pictures work a hell of a lot easier than words. So yeah, if you are into the Revolutionary War, if you like maneuver combat and hex encounter games, and you're looking to pick up War Diary as a subscription and you're trying to figure out what game to go with, this is definitely one to check out. Honestly, out of the ones that I've seen so far, this would probably be up there. There was another one that I reviewed, and you'll have to forgive me. I'll put a note here on the video saying the name of the game, but I can't remember the name off the top of my head. The Island Combat one was probably another one that would be at the top of my list. But the big thing is I like this one for its size, the amount, just the scope of the game. 6 maps covers a vast amount of tables, so you can get a lot of combat going on, which again is just key for this with that maneuver type combat. Nothing preventing it from being solitaire, but nothing helping it either. No hidden information, so you're just two-handing this one if you decide to play it solitaire like I do, but I do that all the time, so it doesn't bother me. If you do need a solitaire AI for your games like this, it does not have one. Just keep that in mind. All right, but that's going to be it for this one. If you guys have any questions, by all means, feel free to put it down below. And like I said, stay tuned. I do have a nice prototype coming up here in the next few days from Mr. David Thompson that I am looking forward to showing you guys. You guys take care. I'll see you in the next one.